I don't, you're saying you're father of many, but I don't see any kids. He's like, but God showed me. God showed me. And because of that faith, because he never let go of that faith, God did build a mighty nation out of him. But he told him, God told Abram, while he was asleep, as God was making the covenant, he said, your children are going to spend 400 years in a land that's not their own. There's going to be a promised land. There's going to be this place that's for them. But they're going to spend 400 years in this place that's not their own. And then they're going to come out of that place into this promised land. God was preparing a place, God was preparing a people, and God was protecting both. Why did those Hebrews, as they were called, why did they end up in Egypt? Because there was a famine in the land, but because God could see that the Canaanites were going to come in and take over the promised land. God knew that. God knew it was going to happen. By the way, who are Canaanites? In Genesis 6, verse 1 through 4, it talks about how the angels saw the women, human women, saw that they were hot, and somehow, I don't know how, they bred with them. And those children were the giants of the land, the Nephilim. And every single culture in the entire world has Nephilim. And they took over that area, now what we would call Palestine, Canaan land, the promised land. They took it over. And if you think about it from the Satan's point of view, Satan, if you think about it from his point of view, what is it that happens in Genesis 3? God promises the snake, there's going to be this seed that comes from Eve, and it's going to come through, and it is going to crush Satan's head. So what's the first thing that happens after that promise? So Adam and Eve give birth to 2 kids. I know I'm like skipping all over the place. Believe me, this actually applies. Okay, Cain and Abel, 2 kids, both seeds from Eve. Cain kills Abel. Abel's now dead, and Cain is cast out and wandering and totally discredited. So that seed isn't going to crush Satan's head. So Satan's like, okay, got rid of that one. Then they have another one. They have Seth. And the whole time, Satan is just looking at it going, God's not a liar. Believe me, I don't think anybody believes God as much as Satan does. Because he knows it's a fact. But he's just playing the odds. He's trying to figure out, okay, how can I get around this? How can I postpone my inevitable demise? How can I do this? How can I do this? And we are actually living in those times of that postponement. And it's one thing after another, trying to pollute the bloodline, trying to keep that seed from coming from that woman to create the person, the being that's going to crush Satan's head. And it's this giant cat and mouse game. But God knows the end from the beginning, because God's outside of time. So you have angels who mate with human women. Well, if the bloodline isn't pure, if the seed isn't pure, then Satan doesn't have to worry about it. So if we can create yet another group of people on the planet, that's one group of people we don't have to worry about. And it said that those people were giants. And eventually those giants, they started taking over cultures. You know, I know a lot of people say, well, the Bible doesn't say anything about the gods that are in Greek mythology and Roman mythology. And the Bible doesn't say anything about this history or that history. Therefore, the Bible's not true. No, the Bible isn't concerned with them. The Bible is about a people, God's people, Yahweh's people, in a certain place at a certain time. It's not about everything and everybody at all times. So when people say, well, what about this culture, and what about that culture, and what about Greek gods, and what about Norse gods, and what about all this other, what about all these civilizations in South America, and all these civilizations in Asia, and all these civilizations in the Hindu worlds, and all that stuff. The Bible isn't concerned with that. It doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means that that's not the focus of that book. That book is about Yahweh and Yahweh's people and what happened to them. And it follows it pretty strictly. So they began to mess up the bloodlines. They began to create families and people that weren't God's people anymore. To the point where God said, I have to deal with this. Because people were crying out, saying, we've got these giants, they're controlling us, they're running our countries, they're running our lands, and they're eating us. Because the Bible said they turned to cannibalism because they couldn't get enough food. And eventually God heard their cries and he delivered them. And the way he delivered them was by sending a flood to wipe out everybody on the earth. It said that Noah was perfect in his generations. What does that mean? It means his bloodlines were pure. They could trace it all the way back to Adam and Eve. He was 100% human being. He wasn't mingled with all this other stuff. You ever watch Harry Potter? I'm the only one that's ever seen Harry Potter.
I've seen it.
Yep, mudbloods.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the idea of mudbloods. It's the idea of a mix that isn't what's important. So God floods the earth. Only it doesn't actually stop it, because there's still angels, and there's still angels who are willing to come down and procreate and make these illegal families. It still continues. And even in Genesis 6, it says, there were giants in the land in those days and also after. When we look at the fall, when we say the fall of mankind, what does everybody think? It's not a trick question. Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. We all think of Adam and Eve and the fall, right?
Right.
But it's not just one fall. It's a whole bunch of minor little catastrophes where every time we turn around, people are doing what they want to do independent of God. And so the next major one after the flood is the Tower of Babel. It says that King Nimrod decided he was going to build this amazing city. Nimrod, by the way, according to the genealogies in the Bible, was a giant. Like Goliath, like Og of Bashan. Matthew 13 takes up, hi Doug, Matthew 13 takes up the same story that we were just reading from. And when Jesus had finished these parables, he went away from there, and coming to his hometown, he taught them in their synagogue. So this is Matthew's version of the same story. He taught them in their synagogue so that they were astonished and said, where did this man get this wisdom and these mighty works? They were talking about the mighty works that he had done in other cities, and they were just blown away. Is this not the carpenter's son? Good grief. Who is this guy? Is not his mother called Mary? And are not his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? Judas. And are not all his sisters with us? We know this guy, but where did he get this? Wow. Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him, it says. They got mad at him. Same thing we just talked about from the book of Luke. They got mad at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown and in his own household. And he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Jumping Japanese Jesus.